Welcome to Over the Line, the podcast. I'm your host, Dan Bland. Welcome to my very first episode. That was original music by Justin Underwood. Justin, thank you for allowing us to use your music, and we'll hope to have you on the show soon. Today is my very first guest is Connor Barnette. Connor and I have been friends for many, many years. I was excited that he said yes to be the first guest and come on and talk about Rock the Rind. Connor, welcome. Thank you for being on.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I don't know if I'm more excited and honored to be the first guest or nervous because I'm going to be the guinea pig here, but I'm excited. I'm excited you're having me, and I'm excited to talk about Rock the Rind and the festival here. Maybe tell everybody kind of what's the theme around the podcast.
So I put this podcast together with just kind of the thought of interviewing people here in the community. I've always felt like there's, I named it as legends and leaders and influencers, but there's a lot of good people with a lot of good stories to tell. I want to talk to a lot of small business owners and hear their stories of success. And, a lot of times people know a name or they know a face, but you don't necessarily know somebody's story. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to do here is put a podcast together that people can listen to. And when they hear the name or they see the face, they go, oh, I feel like I know that person a little bit better now. Or if we have somebody on that may be somewhat misunderstood, maybe people can walk away and go, I've got a better understanding of that person now, and I've gained a world of respect for. And, that's really what I'm hoping for here is just people in our small town to get to know people just a little bit better.
Well, again, I'm honored to be here and excited to get started.
I don't think there's a bigger topic in Brownstown than talking about Rock the Rind. We're a 2,900 person town. To have Rock the Rind and the Watermelon Festival is pretty special. And when I talk to people here in Brownstown, or whether I talk to people in surrounding towns, they all want to know the same thing. How did you get started with that? How did that take off? Where did you begin? And so there's a million things I feel like you and I can talk about. Lord knows we could probably do 10 episodes of some of the things that we've experienced and done, or, we could talk about this year's Rock the Rind. But what I want to talk about is the beginning of this thing, kind of how this thing started, how it was put together, and the people involved, and just focus on the beginnings of it.
Sure. And you're probably going to have to reel me in a couple times. This may be a little sporadic and all over the place, but honestly, that's what it's felt like over the last 3 years as we've kind of grown and continued to figure this whole thing out. I have absolutely no background in music or festivals or anything that we're doing now. I feel like I've learned a lot over the last 24 months, and we've gotten a lot better at it, but it's definitely been overwhelming, very overwhelming at times, and we're just figuring out a little bit piece by piece. I feel like we're finally in a good spot and have our feet underneath us, and I'm just excited to see what that looks like this year and moving forward.
When I started talking to people about putting this podcast together, you were one of the very first people that people mentioned coming on here and talking about Rock the Rind, and I think it's the biggest topic in town.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but it's definitely been fun to watch it grow here over the last 3 years and turn into what it has in the lineup we've got coming in 2025.
I know you are a goal setter and a dreamer, and I know a lot of people on that board are the same way. You've got a sign in your office that says, be a doer, not a dreamer. I see that every time I come in, and it's perfect for you because that is who you are. And, I remember, 4 years ago, you and I standing on a golf course together, and you said, I want to bring back the Watermelon Festival and have a music festival along with it. And I was kind of got by it, but at the same time, I told you to pursue it. You'd be great at it. And when you pulled it off, it just seemed like things had finally come full circle with it. Tell us a little bit about just the thought process that went into creating Rock the Rind.
Yeah, so Luke Nolte and I started with Brownstown Ewing Main Street in 2015. We had just moved back home from school. We met with the Main Street organization already existed. There was a handful of really good people doing really good stuff. So Heritage Park and the Pavilion actually came through as a Main Street program. The depot down in Ewing was a Main Street program, but the Main Street and the 501c3 was really there more as a mechanism to capture some grant money that was coming in to complete those projects. There wasn't a ton of activity outside of those few really big projects, and it was all membership based. So the only income for the organization was memberships and local businesses, and I think they were charging $5 per membership at the time. So when they asked Luke and I to step in and kind of carry the reins forward from there, I think there was around $600 in the bank account. We were excited to get started. We had a lot of good ideas, but $600 doesn't go very far. So, then we start thinking, well, what's next? We kind of had to reimagine what that membership base looked like. So Went through and restructured that, took it from a $5 membership to I think the lowest was around $100 and up from there. Had a lot of local support from our businesses, as we always do, and we're able to grow that to, our revenue annually was around $3,000. That's what we were budgeting off of. So a little better, but still doesn't get very far, and especially as the years went, we started in 2015, 16. By the time we got to 2022, you can't do a whole lot with $3,000. So a couple of the projects we were looking at the time were the flower pots, the hanging baskets, benches, trash cans, banners, and then we were putting on quite a few community events. So Easter egg hunt, the Santa at the courthouse, legislative breakfast. But in 2018, we started a summer concert series. So it consisted of four shows throughout the summer, regional talent, pretty low budget, especially compared to what we're doing now. Had one food vendor and one drink vendor come in per show. I think we started those, and at the very first one, we had 15 people show up. They steadily grew to the last show we had, I think, was Alex Williams, and we had about 250 people there. So we saw those on a much smaller scale kind of succeed, and people were becoming more excited about it. That had been something when this new group kind of moved in and started Main Street. That was one of our goals, was to create that summer concert series. We saw that it was successful in other communities. Another goal that was talked about for a long time was a festival. So, in Jackson County, we've got great festivals. We've got Seymour Oktoberfest, Fort Valonia Days, Crothersville Red, White, and Blue, the Freetown Freedom Festival. Houston has a festival. It seems like every municipality, incorporated or unincorporated, have a festival at some point during the year. And our discussions around that were, we're the town seat, and we don't have anything now that the Watermelon Festival's gone. So it was always kind of a priority for us to start a festival. I will say that's unique for a Main Street organization. That's usually not the organization you see festivals come from. But it was always in the back of our mind. And then we had the summer concert series. I've always been passionate about music. Can't play an instrument, I can't sing, but my wife Caitlin and I like going to shows. I try to stay up to date on some of the new and upcoming artists, and we were trying to feed into that summer concert series with some of those up-and-coming artists, and I think it was around 2020, so during the COVID shutdown, we weren't doing anything. We had no events, we had no summer concert series. The organization as a whole was sitting pretty idle, and about that time is when conversations really started to pick up around, hey, maybe we should talk about this more and make this a reality. Once everything gets back to normal, we've got time to do some planning here. Our organization started to discuss that and what that looked like. Rather than start something from scratch, I think the Watermelon Festival was a natural fit because it was so successful for so many years. I think it started in 1968, was heavily attended, a super popular festival in the community and even regionally. And then I don't know what happened and what the downfall of it was, but it seemed to really take a step backwards there the last 5-10 years, and then I think in 2016 was the last year they had it. But that's what our discussions were centered around, was let's bring the Watermelon Festival back, but what's that look like? I don't think just the vendors and just the food vendors, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of festivals that do that. What's going to make us unique and stand out compared to some of these other festivals in not only the community but the state? And from what we could find, around us anyway, there wasn't a music festival or a festival that was based solely around music. So we kind of paired that summer concert series with some of the historic events of the Watermelon Festival, being the food vendors, the watermelon-based events, the craft vendors, some of the kids' activities, but then tied that into what obviously is the draw, and that's a major music festival in the state of Indiana.
So we're very fortunate. I talk to a lot of people that aren't from Brownstown or even from Jackson County, and we have a very unique downtown. In my opinion, we have one of the most beautiful courthouse squares, I think, in the state of Indiana. I'm biased, but I think we do. And then you put that in with the Heritage Park and the stage and kind of the way the facilities work around there. And then you put that in with the Brownstown Ewing Main Street. It just seems like it was meant to be. Does it feel that way to you sometimes, with the foundation of how everything is laid out downtown with what you guys had dreamed of? It's rare. It just seems like it all fits in a downtown setting, which is perfect for what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, so it didn't at first. I mean, it felt like we were trying to shove a square peg into a round hole. I mean, there was a lot of thought and a lot of late nights and a lot of walking around the courthouse square trying to decide what this layout was going to look like. Where's the stage going to be? Originally, the thought was, so I guess rewind to the very beginning, and when we really started putting pen to paper, this was going to be a fairly small music festival. I mean, we were looking at a budget of around $20,000 total. We were going to utilize the Heritage Park stage and utilize Heritage Park in the street as your seating area. The more we talked about it, the wilder the ideas got, I guess, and the bigger we started thinking. We were very fortunate right off the bat to take our idea to a couple local sponsors and partners who have been with us a long time, even through the summer concert series and some of our smaller events. And they seemed 100% on board and were able to really accelerate that vision, I guess, by pumping some dollars into it. Because, I mean, that's what this whole thing comes down to. And I talk about this a lot, but like music festivals like Rock the Rind, 4,000 people with that kind of talent are not supposed to happen in a community or a town this size.
Yeah, I mean, we've got 2,900 people, I think, in this town. And on Rock the Rind Day, you're expecting 4,000 plus. Is that correct?
Yeah, so 2,900 people and around 1.5 square miles. That's just this isn't a lineup you see in a municipality like this.
When you started out, you talked about $600 or something in the Main Street Ewing, but when you sat down and the dreams became bigger and bigger and bigger, and you said, we're going to really make this thing a much bigger festival than maybe that you first thought of, what type of money were you starting out with?
Yeah, so I met Drew Eads at that last Alex Williams show I had mentioned in our summer concert series, and we talked a little bit. He told me a little bit about himself and that he does the Rooster Tail Music Festival. And when we decided to move forward with the Watermelon Festival and Rock the Rind, and decided we were going to go for some bigger artist and some bigger name artist, that's a whole lot different than booking a regional act for our summer concert series. There's a lot that goes into it. You really have to have those personal connections, which I did not. I had no idea what I was doing. I was really overwhelmed, and I'd say at one point we were talking about pulling the plug just because I didn't even know where to start. I contacted Drew, and knowing that he had the background of Rooster Tail and booking artists, and Drew was really able to help us and point us in the right direction, kind of connect us with who we needed to talk to. So, again, a lot of nights walking the square, deciding where the stage is going to be located, what our numbers look like, what that translates in terms of talent. Because going into this, I didn't know if artist A cost $2,500, $25,000, or $125,000. Like I did not know that market. So you're trying to figure out where to start. You don't want to offend anybody by trying to make an offer. So Drew was invaluable in that sense of being able to kind of get our foot in the door, start having those discussions with agents, and getting us started down that path. But when we originally started the conversation, and we had a handful of 90 countries artists is what we were looking for, and Sarah Evans was high on that list along with a few others. So we started getting quotes and having conversations with the agencies. At that time, we had around $3,800 in the bank. That doesn't get you very far. All of these artists, we're talking tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars that have headlined our festival, and we just kind of took a risk.
Yeah, a big risk. Was that hearing those numbers for the first time and seeing what some of these artists cost to bring them to these festivals, did that just kind of take the wind out of your sail a little bit, or did you start thinking immediately like, okay, this is going to be a real challenge. We got to get to work?
Yeah, definitely a challenge, and it's time to get to work. We were looking at it more of a target than daunting. We had something to aim for at that point. We had some real numbers to use rather than, hey, we think we can do this for $50,000. Well, we weren't even close. So, once we got those budget numbers, before we ever signed a contract, we knew where we needed to be. So that's when we started having those conversations with some of our local partners and sponsors, and doing the math on, okay, we need to sell X amount of tickets to break even. What's insurance look like? What does power? The courthouse square was not equipped with the type of power we needed for 18 food vendors. So that was a huge challenge for us.
So tell me about scheduling these artists, because you don't just pick up the phone and call Sarah Evans, obviously. There's a process to that. And I think a lot of people want to know, how do you schedule these artists? What's the process? Do you talk to agents? Do you talk to managers? How far in advance do you have to schedule these people? Can you share with us just a little bit about how the entire process of bringing these bands and these artists onto the label?
Yeah, so there are a ton of challenges with trying to schedule and book these artists. I bet we started with over 100 artists this year that were kind of on the wish list. Like, hey, we think this would be a good fit. We think they would fall within our price range. Let's start to see what that looks like. Well, the one thing, and I had no idea what a radius clause was when we started all of this. And when I talk to people, they have no idea, but that is by far the number one challenge we deal with now is radius clauses on artists. So what that is we're very fortunate in Brownstown to be surrounded by Indianapolis and Louisville and Cincinnati, and I think that's one of the best things about living here is you have this small town feel. We're far enough away from that nonsense, but you want to get out and go to a show or go get something to eat or get away for the weekend, you're an hour away. The downside to that is when you're booking a music festival, there's a lot of big music festivals in those municipalities. So Bourbon and Beyond, Railbird, those festivals will put a radius clause on these artists to where, let's say, 90 miles, 90 days, or 180 days, 180 miles. So what that means is those artists cannot play within X number of miles within X number of days of their festival. They fall on each side of us close enough. I mean, I'm just using those two as an example. This is any festival and any show kind of in the tri-state area to where if Charles Wesley Godwin is going to play Railbird, then he's just eliminated from playing Rock the Rind because he falls within that radius clause. Well, those are giant festivals. I mean, some of those are 40, 50 artists deep. So by the time you go through those radius clauses, plus their summer tours that they're already playing, where that date's already booked up, I mean, that list of 100 artists gets trimmed down to maybe 20 pretty quickly. And then you start discussing with these agencies what the price is and what that looks like. Well, then you may be knocked down to 10 immediately because that's another challenge we deal with is as great as Brownstown, Indiana is, and we all know that, an agent sitting in Nashville, Tennessee, or Los Angeles or New York has no idea where Brownstown's at. And when you Google it and see 1.5 square miles and 2,900 people, it doesn't look like most of the music festival venues that they're playing. So, man, that was really, really difficult year one. I mean, that was a huge hurdle for us. And then even into year two, well, what's the venue look like? Well, year one, we didn't have any pictures. And we didn't even really know what it was going to look like till we got it set up. So, luckily, it went well year one. We were able to get a very solid lineup booked. Last year's lineup was phenomenal, and now we've got real pictures, and we've got a stage layout, and we know where our ticketed areas are. So it's becoming easier and easier. We're finally getting a reputation of being, legitimate, but very hospitable, very well organized, and that's really going very clean. That's really going a long way because I would say out of all the artists that we book and deal with, 90% of them are with 3 or 4 of the big agencies. So as you're dealing with them, you're developing this relationship and you get your 3 or 4 people with each agency that you work with. Well, then word travels like wildfire. I mean, if year one would have been a disaster, we probably wouldn't have had a year two because none of the agencies would have worked with us. Luckily, year one went well. Year two went very, very well. And now word's starting to spread around those agencies and some of these challenges that seemed monumental in year one are just getting easier and easier to kind of navigate through.
Yeah. One of my favorite things of helping you kind of behind the scenes with some stuff is taking care of the writers that some of these artists ask for. Not that anybody's extremely picky or has requests that's just impossible to deal with, but I find that kind of strange, but at the same time, I get it. You have to have everything in place. So they have a list of things they want backstage, or they have a list of things before the show. And what's that like, trying to track all that down and put all that together for each individual artist?
Yeah, luckily we've got some really good volunteers that have gotten to the point where they kind of specialize in tracking that stuff down now, and we've discovered that a lot of the stuff they want you can't buy in Brownstown, Indiana.
You sent me after black Solo cups, I believe. And hey, we were in Brownstown. If they didn't have them at Dollar General store, there just wasn't a whole lot of places for me to go find them. But it's strange to see some of the requests that some of the artists that they have. But, it sounds like, in talking to you year one and then year two, we've had some really good artists that really appreciated Brownstown when they left, had a lot of good things to say. And, that's huge because then they're going to go tell other artists that coming to play Rock the Rind was, like you said, not only legit, but the crowd was, heavily involved and it was well put together and run.
Yeah, I think what we lack in, what some of these larger music festivals have in terms of the wow factor, we make up for in the hospitality. I think it's really cool that our venue holds around 4,000 people. We were able to sell it out last year for Travis on Friday night. There's not a bad seat if you're all the way in the back by the tank. You're in a better seat than you are at 90% towards the front of these music festivals. So it definitely has a cool factor. There's been some discussion like, man, this thing's really growing. At some point, you're going to have to move it. We're just going to sell it out. My goal is if we get to a point where we're selling this thing out in June, that's great. And then it just becomes more.
Get your tickets early.
Yeah, right. If we move it from the courthouse square, with the Judicial Center in the back and Heritage Park right there to act as our kind of our elevated VIP area in the courthouse, I think it just loses all the uniqueness and cool factor.
Oh, yeah. You guys did some really cool stuff last year, with the flag on the courthouse and, the little flyover that we had. And, again, our town square is unique. If you move it out to a field somewhere, it loses all of that. Tell me about structuring the volunteers and the community service involvement, because you've reached out to a lot of people, whether it be football teams or dance teams or just talking to off-duty officers or the list goes on and on. But I think one of the things that I notice the last 2 years is just how many people in our town is willing to just step up and volunteer their time. And I don't know if you see that in bigger cities. I don't know if you see that in other festivals. But to me, it lets you know that this isn't just this little music festival. This is Brownstown people taking a ton of pride in this and backing and supporting this and doing whatever they can to help.
Yeah, and I've said this multiple times, but, I'd put our community up against anybody. I hope they understand that without their support and them volunteering and being on site to do those things, this just wouldn't happen. Because if I had to pay, I think we had over 150 volunteers that volunteered time at some point over the weekend last year. If we had to pay 150 people, the money's not there,
Well, one of the things that I noticed year one to year two is from your standpoint, I remember how year one that felt like kind of like herding cats. And I could see the stress of trying to, had so many people willing to help and so many people willing to volunteer. And that's great. But that was an animal just keeping that all organized.
Luckily, I've learned to delegate a little bit and brought in, I've got some really good friends that are more than willing to step up and take on some of those responsibilities. Derek Cook, he kind of oversaw the volunteers last year and knocked it out of the park. The first year, I think my phone rang 3,000 times, and I couldn't keep up with it, and I was overwhelmed. It was, looking back, very disorganized. I know it felt like it went fairly smooth, I think, to everybody that was in attendance, but it was not. And having Derek last year to kind of lean on and take some of the pressure off me and be able to answer those phone calls was huge, and he did such a great job. I didn't hear of a single hiccup. And it's just people like that. I could go down a list of literally 100 people that help with the weekend, and everybody's kind of found their niche to where they've seen how it operates, they know what's to be expected. It's gotten to the point where it really runs very smooth in a short amount of time. It's kind of funny to think about that we're only in year 3, because after last year, I feel like it's the steps that we took from year 1 to year 2 were pretty wild, really, when you think about it. All the way around, it's grown so fast.
To some degree, do you feel like you're just now finding your footing and just now kind of hitting your stride, just because it's now starting to feel like, hey, this is normal?
Yeah, and I still feel, I feel like we're definitely finding our footing, but we're still trying to, enhance the experience any way we can. And Jade Peters and I were talking about this the other day. As soon as we seem to find our footing, we come up with another crazy idea. And I think that's the beauty of it. I've kind of told everybody it's a 5-year plan. So, the start of this, the entire reason it exists is because we need money to do stuff with Main Street. I hit on our budget before Rock the Rind was $3,000. You can't do anything with $3,000 to $4,000. That was the whole purpose of this festival, was to generate revenue for Main Street. So everybody wants to know, well, when we were starting on Main Street projects, when are we going to start tackling some other stuff, trying to play the long game? I think after 5 years, we'll really we'll have it figured out. It'll be what it is. We'll obviously continue to build on it and make it better every year, but in 5 years, we'll know where our dollars are at. We'll have our infrastructure in place. We'll have a lot of the equipment that we've rented. We're trying to purchase the stuff that makes sense. And yeah, I think we've got a couple of years to go before we've got it all figured out, but we're definitely heading in that direction.
Well, I know you're never satisfied. And sometimes I get a kick out of, the new ideas that you have, and the bigger, the better. You're constantly thinking of ways to make this better. And I don't think people really understand that about you is, you're always dreaming, but you're always trying to figure out how to make those dreams a reality. And every year I'm come to expect that I know there's going to be surprises year 3 for everybody here in town. And I'm anxious to see what you do year 4 and year 5, because I know no matter what you did the previous year, you're not going to be satisfied. It's got to be a little bit better the next year. One of the things that is impressive to me is how the sponsorships work. When you go to a lot of these festivals and you look up and you see the sponsorships, or Coca-Cola or a major corporation, when you come to Rock the Rind, you're seeing the bulk of this, if not almost all of this. This is all locally sponsored. It's people that own small businesses right here in our community, and they're kind of the ones that was the foundation of kicking this thing off. And those are the ones you've been able to lean on and come back and keep sponsoring. How huge has that been for the money to come in to help sponsor this coming from a local level?
Yeah, it's invaluable. And year 1, we had, I think, 42 sponsors, and we kind of made a decision at the beginning of that, was probably pretty aggressive, that we were going to ask for a minimum of $1,000 sponsorship and then go up from there. Totally understanding that these are the same businesses that get hit up by every single organization in the community over and over and over again. And $1,000 is a big ask. We don't take that for granted. But we also knew how expensive this was going to be to put on and to do it right. And I was blown away. When we had 42 partners at a minimum of $1,000 level in year 1, I really couldn't believe it. And that put us in a really good spot for year 2. And it's funny, after that first one, we had these businesses coming to us and asking how they could help and when sponsorship was due. And now going into year 3, we're looking at over 150 sponsors for this event. And they're all located in Jackson County, outside of maybe 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of those sponsors come to you and say, hey, I know I gave this last year. I want to do even more next year.
Yeah, but again, blows me away. I think that speaks volumes to what everybody thinks about it. I think everybody really enjoys and looks forward to that weekend every year. And it's always been a goal of ours to provide value back to our sponsors. So we try to do unique things. We give sponsorship boxes with some merch, and obviously the VIP tickets, drink tickets for the Oddfellows event last year with Hard Truth. And again this year, still trying to find different ways to elevate that experience and really make sure we're taking care of those people, because you're exactly right. None of this happens without them. And as our sponsorship grows and our partnership list grows, the festival just continues to grow. We're a 501c3. Again, we're shooting for, to be profitable and have money to put on the festival the way it needs to be put on, but also do things around town in year 5. But as of right now, we're just growing as quick as we can responsibly. And as the sponsorships continue to increase, that just allows us to kind of take this thing to the next level.
Yeah, so this is an outdoor festival, obviously, and so weather is a big factor in this. And I know year 1 there was the nerves of, we finally got to this point and it's showtime, and we're worried about the weather, and it was a close call year 1. Tell me just about the worry and the stress that went into that and how that ultimately played out.
Yeah, super excited it's going to be 70 degrees and sunny this year, because the last 2 years we've had to deal with rain at least once throughout the weekend, and some 70-mile-an-hour winds last year. So that's always stressful. So, one important aspect of this is we have rain insurance, and we have a lot of rain insurance. If it rains out the show, we're going to be just fine, and the show's going to go on next year. Hopefully we get a night in. it's not gonna, if it rains, it's not gonna ruin the festival, and we're never gonna do it again. We're gonna get the artists paid, we're gonna get everybody their money refunded and the tickets refunded for that night. But it's super stressful as a storm's rolling in, and we're having to make a call on whether or not it's appropriate to leave these people out in the rain or if we need to evacuate. We've got an evacuation plan. Toby Ortman with EMA, I actually met with him 2 weeks ago. He's preparing an evacuation plan and going to set up their mobile control center to kind of keep an eye on the weather to take some of that burden off of us next year, which is going to be huge. Because I'll be honest with you, that's the most stressed I get throughout the weekend is when we have a pop-up storm like that. So looking forward to having him on site to help take care of that. But really, I mean, the biggest downfall of the weather is I think it scares people away sometimes. That definitely happened year one. It looked like it was going to storm all day, and it never did. But there was a lot of people that didn't buy their tickets and didn't show up the day of because of the threat of weather.
So this is a kind of a wide open question, and it's something that you may have to think about for just a minute. But what do you know now in the process, now going into year 3, that you wish you could go back and tell yourself when you were planning year 1?
I mean, that list is too. We'd be here for 4 or 5 hours talking. I mean, we literally had no idea what we were doing year 1. I mean, it's not like, well, we had no idea. We were starting from scratch, didn't know anything about booking artists, didn't know anything about anything. We asked a lot of questions, There's so much more that goes into it than the weekend of. There's the insurance policies as far as liability, liquor liability, rain. It's not just the music. We have the kids area that we want to see be successful. It's trying to organize with all of our vendors and food vendors and make sure that they have a schedule. There's just so much. And that year 1, it was more of a learning experience than anything. We kept very detailed notes. We kept a spreadsheet and kind of a checklist of everything we were doing. That way, coming back in year 2, we knew what we had done previously, and we were able to just build off of that. Man, the list is never ending on what we would have done different and what I wish I'd known, but it's part of the growing experience.
Yeah, if I remember, what was it, a week or two maybe after year 1, you kind of called a meeting, got everybody together, and say, what do we do different for next year? How do you go about streamlining certain things and just kind of put the whole thing and process the whole thing and on what you need to do better for the next year.
Yeah, another great thing about having 150 volunteers that are local and some of your best friends is you can ask them what they saw. What did you see that didn't work? Well, we got a long list, but that was great because I think for the most part we addressed some of those things in year 2. Now we have another list that we need to fix going into year 3. It's never ending, but we're definitely making progress.
Yeah. I'm probably going to ask just about everybody this question because I feel it's so important to this podcast. It's really the reason why I wanted to do this podcast. And the question is what makes Brownstown so much different than other communities? And why is Brownstown so special?
Yeah, Brownstown and Jackson County as a whole, man, they've been so good to me. Growing up, I went to school, came back a couple of years later, and it never ceases to amaze me just how tight-knit everybody is, how they will get behind anything and support it better than anybody else I see around the state. Obviously, our athletics here in Brownstown show that about as well as anything, just the amount of support we have in comparison to other schools, and I think that translates to success. I'd say the same thing about Rock the Rind, especially year 1. We're growing and we have more people coming in regionally, but if it wasn't for our local folks showing up year 1, we wouldn't have sold any tickets and we wouldn't have had a year 2. And instead, they showed up, they bought all the tickets, they volunteered, they worked the gate, they helped park food vendors. Everybody just gets behind everything. It's unbelievable.
One of the things that I've noticed, and it's not just you. There's so many people that make this thing work, and there's so many people that are ahead of different departments and different aspects of this thing. But everyone is looking to help another. There's no opinions that become too strong or nobody seems to want to, control this thing. Everybody's just trying to bounce off of each other and make this the best festival that it can be. I've got family that came year 1, and the first thing they said was, this doesn't happen in other small towns. It just doesn't, because too many opinions get involved, and then the next thing you know, the thing falls apart. And one of the things I've noticed about the Rock the Rind, the whole Watermelon Festival is this community, whether it's you or Luke Nolding or anybody on the board is, there's such a a mentality of we're behind you, Connor, and whatever you say, we're behind it. There's no, well, let me interject my opinion here. It amazes me how many people in this community, when you ask them about Rock the Rind, they'll just say, whatever Connor asked me to do, I'm there to do it. And so I know you're not the type of person that, is looking for necessarily the glory in this, but I also know how much this means to you. So it's cool that you've put this all together. It's cool that the town has done this. It's obviously going in the right direction. Let me ask you this, because I know you're so driven. Have you taken the time to stop and smell the roses? You sat down at these shows. Do you have a time where you can just kind of relax, take a deep breath, and say, we did it. We did it year one. We did it year two. Is there a stop and smell the roses moment at any time in this process for you?
I don't think we've got there quite yet. And part of that is you never really stop trying to grow. So like the lineup, I was up Sunday night with tape on my eyelids after Rock the Rind this year, trying to figure out who we were sending emails to the next day. And I sent a list to Drew, and we started working again. And the booking process is funny. It's not pick up the phone, call the agent, and say, hey, we want to book this person. We touched on the radius clauses a little bit, but that's a 2-week process minimum on booking artists.
So it literally starts like, year two ended, and the next day it was talking about how do we get started bringing in artists and people for year three.
Yeah, the agencies typically will not entertain offers more than a year in advance. That being said, we reached out to 4 or 5 artists that we really wanted the day after last year, and we were already radius claused out, or they already had shows booked that weekend. So you have got to be right on top of it when the festival ends, starting again. And if you don't, then you just miss out. And that's what I was, it's a minimum 2-week process typically to book these artists, and a lot of times it's more than that. So this year we held on for 45 days and thought we were getting close to the finish line on getting an artist booked, and it all fell apart after 45 days. Well, then you're starting all over. So I had a lot of people asking me, are we going to have tickets on sale for Christmas? I really want to buy that for my granddaughter or my grandkids or my kids. And I was trying, we're chugging in the background as hard as we can. But that 3 or 4 months, that's how long it takes to book this entire lineup. It's stressful. You're constantly pivoting to plan A, or from plan A to plan B, C, D, E. I think we got down to X on a couple artists this year, and we're really happy with the lineup. But we thought we had it all figured out. We started sending offers, and from where we started to where we ended, I think we got 2 of the artists that were on our initial list, which we're super happy with what we got. But that just shows you how hard it is to book some of these guys. And yeah, it's a never-ending process, because then as soon as we get the lineup booked, we're moving on to, well, we better start reaching out about insurance and making sure we got that lined up. Well, it's time to book vendors. What can we do better for next year? Well, we got to call the stage guy. I mean, it's a lot of late nights checking boxes, and luckily, like you said, we've got a large committee and a lot of people that take some of that off my plate, because that first year was hell trying to get through it, and now I feel like we've got that a little more streamlined. But it's a very difficult process booking these artists, and it starts the day after we're wrapped up.
One of my favorite stories that came from year 2 last year is you had to go from a stage basically the size of a semi-trailer year 1, is that correct? Like a low boy type semi-trailer, to year 2, and it was massive. Now that was all dictated by the artist. So that was a huge jump, year 1 to year 2, just in the stage. And one of the best stories that came out of year 2 for me is when the semis rolled into town, hauling this massive stage. And there was just volunteers everywhere waiting for those doors to open to put that stage up. And, there was maybe 6 or 7 of those stage guys, 30 or 40 or more people from Brownstown volunteering to put this stage together. And I remember as the stage was going together and everybody was just kind of working like ants, I looked at the guy and I said, now, is this normally how it works when you put these stages up? You go into town, is this normally how this works? And he said, we've never got this kind of community support to put a stage together like this. He said, this is just awesome. So I think he was blown away by that.
Yeah, and I mean, these guys and gals are taking PTO to be there on a Tuesday or Wednesday to help us put up a stage, which is not fun. I mean, you were there. It was miserable putting that stage together, and they're taking time off work and using their vacation time to be on site and help us build this thing. I mean, like you said, the community support and the level of volunteers we have are just second to none.
Ultimately, what does it take to put this whole festival on? From a financial standpoint, what does it take to put this show on?
Yeah, it's sitting here talking about it. It's really insane to think about. But we went from year one, we were around $125,000 all in. And I mean, there's so many costs associated with something like this outside of the artists. We've talked about the insurance. We've talked about, the electricity and getting some of the infrastructure up to date. But last year we were around $125,000. That quickly grew to over $400,000 last year, and will be well over $500,000 this year. And a lot of that's just associated with the level of talent we're bringing in. We've expanded to a third day. We have expanded that third day into a national touring artist. I mean, it's grown very, very quickly, and that's all contributed to the amount of sponsorship that we're able to pull, and the support, again, that we're receiving from the community in terms of dollars is really what it takes to put this on. That and our ticket sales went from, I think year one we did around 750 people on Saturday night and 1,200 on Friday with Sarah. Jump ahead to 2024, we had 1,000 people there on Thursday. We added that third night. We sold out at like 4,200 on Friday, and then Saturday I think we had around 3,000 people there. And this year, I mean, with where ticket sales are at right now compared to where they were last year, I fully expect to if not sell out all three nights, be very, very close.
And there's a lot of things about the festival that have been successful outside of Rock the Rind. I mean, one of the things that I'm blown away by from year one to year two is just how much the Queen pageant grew. That was awesome. I mean, how many girls signed up for that in year one and year two? Do you remember roughly? But I remember being blown away by how many girls signed up for the Queen pageant.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because Caitlin Hackman does a phenomenal job. I want to say, and I could be way off, I want to say there was around 20 to 25 girls, and they expanded the age ranges going into 2024, and I think it was like 65 plus young ladies competing for that. And that's outside my wheelhouse. That's one thing I'm not a part of, but Caitlin does a great job, and how cool is it to see that many young ladies competing to be the Watermelon Fest princess?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's, Jackson County Fair Queen has always been a really big deal in our community. And so it kind of has the feel that the Watermelon Fest Queen pageant may be going down that same path. I mean, it could end up being just a really big deal someday.
Yeah, and that's really cool because we're always very well represented at the State Fair Queen pageant with our Jackson County Fair Queen. But I don't know the ins and outs, but the girls that compete for Miss Indiana, that's two totally different things. So there's the State Fair Queen pageant, and then there's the pageants that lead to Miss Indiana. Well, Caitlin has got us accredited to where the girl that wins the Watermelon Festival Queen pageant can actually go and compete for a chance to be Miss Indiana, which the Fair Queen can't without winning another competition. So definitely not a competition between the two. I think it's really cool to have both aspects and be able to be represented, in both of those organizations. It's really, really cool what it's grown into.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job also with the food trucks and things like that. I know Oktoberfest is kind of known for their food trucks and their food vendors. That's kind of what they're known for. And I noticed starting off, a lot of these food trucks and a lot of these vendors have places scheduled just like these acts. They're scheduled a long time in advance. But you did a really good job of bringing in really good food trucks and really good food vendors. And there was a variety there, but it was very clean. It was very organized. And I think the people that you had in, they made enough money that I think it was worth their while to come back next year.
Yeah, so that's another thing. It was really difficult in year one to try to attract some of these vendors because we were a new startup festival, or they had participated in the Watermelon Festival years ago when it was kind of on its downswing, and it was hard to bring them back. Now going into year three, I mean, we're going to expand just a little bit and kind of bring them around the corner and add to what we have just because of the amount of people that we're expecting for the festival. But they're beating our door down now. Like, they really want to be a part of it. And we've quickly flipped the reputation of this festival to where I feel like about everybody wants to be a part of it now. That was really tough to get anybody to give us the time of day in year one. And now we're seeing people competing to be involved. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, the other cool thing about this is we're bringing so many people outside of our community into Jackson County, into Brownstown. And I've said it's kind of our time to shine. these people are getting a glimpse of what Brownstown is, what Jackson County is, what the people are all about. And so it's our chance to influence the people that surround us coming in, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, it is a showcase. And I don't know what this will turn into, if anything, down the road, but I think just having that many people from out of town, again, seeing that hospitality, seeing how we do things, seeing that passion shine through, I really think the festival, even though it's turned into a kind of a big thing on its own, I do think it could lead to bigger things down the road. I don't know what those are, but you already start to see, I feel like people taking a little more pride in things and maybe thinking a little bigger around town. And that's kind of the goal, right? Is to get everybody on that same wavelength and like, what's next? What can we do to...
You've kind of shown people in our small town that no dream is too big. That's what I love about this, is now people are coming up with all kinds of other ideas of things that we can do. And what can we do better, And so that's really cool too. Tell me a little bit about the risk going into year one that's involved in this. The cost involved in putting this together, the weather, the insurance, where you stood financially in your checking account before you ever signed the first act. Tell me a little bit about where you started financially and the risk involved.
Yeah, I'll just be super transparent. I mean, our books are open to anyone that wants to see them, and we signed the contract with Sarah Evans with $3,800 in our checking account. Sarah Evans was a lot more than $3,800. So I can tell you the thought process that went into it for me, and I told the board, and they kind of shook their heads. I don't know if they felt the same way I did or not, but all of these contracts required a 50% deposit down 3 months prior to the event, and then 50% the day of. So we were counting on a lot of ticket sales that we didn't know. It was our first year. We didn't know if we were going to sell out or sell 200 tickets. We did have a little bit committed in sponsorship, and that grew as we got closer to the festival. But when we signed the contract, we had talked to 2 or 3 people that were interested in sponsoring it, and that's it. So, yeah, there's a ton of risk. And what I kind of told the board, and again, they shook their heads and went along with it, luckily. But what happens if we fail? Like, we get 3 months out and cancel it. And the biggest thing, if you cancel a show before that 3 months, you're not out any dollars, but you'll never book another artist again, because word travels like wildfire, and your reputation's ruined. Like, Brownstown Ewing Main Street's never going to book a concert or an artist again. We weren't doing it at the time anyway, outside of our summer concert series. So I think everybody just kind of had the mindset of, well, let's give it a shot and see what happens.
Yeah, so there's a real risk of this thing never even taking off the ground.
Yeah, if it got to the point where it didn't make financial sense, we were going to pull the plug and just be done. And I'm not so sure that Main Street wouldn't have just folded up at that point, because we were tired of battling only having $3,000 in the bank. Like, we had to find a way to generate some revenue, and this was kind of our big risk. And luckily, looking back, it paid off, and I'm really excited for the future of that organization and the future of Rock the Rind. I don't know that I'll be involved on the board or running this forever, but I think whenever me and the current board members leave, it's going to be in a really good place for whoever's next.
Well, the town's certainly got a lot of faith in you and all the members of the board that have put this together. I know you've got a lot of support, a lot of backing, and I speak for the whole town, where I look so forward to this every year now. It's in seeing where this thing's going to go.
Yeah, and I wish we could sit here and run through every board member and volunteer and the people that help the weekend of, that spend, 72 plus hours on site, unloading, loading, moving bike racks, working gates. It's just, really, the list is so large of people that do so much. And when you're there, just look around. Anybody that's got that green shirt on working their tail off, the list is just, it goes on and on and on of the great people that are involved in helping to make this thing work. I appreciate you having me on and kind of being the voice of this thing, but I'm just a small part of this community, really, is what it comes down to. The entire community gets behind this and helps put it on, and we just couldn't be more thankful for everybody.
Well, thanks for being on the show, being the very first guest, Connor. Thanks for kind of pushing me to do this. There's been a lot of people that I gave this idea to, but very few people that'll push me off the ledge like you will, and I greatly appreciate that. So I can't wait to have you back in July to talk about this year's Rock the Rind.
Yeah, I think we've established that kind of silly ideas can really get some legs and take off in a hurry. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with this and watching the podcast continue to grow. I want to thank you again for having me on and having the privilege of being the first guest. And I'm looking forward to coming back in July and doing it all over again.
All right, buddy. We'll do it again. Thanks again, everybody. We'll take you home with a little more music from Justin Underwood. Thanks for listening.
I feel like we just finally started getting in our groove there at the end.
Bourbon's awesome.
It is. It got us loosened up a little bit.
Let's roll those windows down. Let your hair fly all around. We've gotta live this life like today will be our last one. Gonna make a memory, another chapter in our love story. Someday we'll look back and be proud of all we've done. Yeah, someday we'll look back and be proud of all we've done while we were young. While